I'd like to start with an apology this morning. I've caught whatever it is that everybody's catching. So I might at some point just descend into just an appalling coughing, sneezing fit, which I promise to aim this way, not that way, or go behind the drum screen. Perhaps they could double as should just set it up here. But yes, so apologies if I'm slightly raspy or at some point get slightly coffee. That has come on in the last couple of days. So we're going to try and muddle through this together, but we'll be all right. Are you all doing okay? Yeah, everybody else is fine, so that's fine. We've been in this really sort of helpful this really helpful series for this season that we're in as a church, where we've just stopped to look at in the book of John, there are these statements again and again and again where Jesus says, I am something, and we've looked at them. And I'd love to encourage you, if you've not been here for the last few weeks, to catch up on some of the talks in the last few weeks, because it's been just a really helpful moment for us as a church to just look at what does Jesus actually say about himself? What are the things that he wants to primarily communicate to us about his nature and his values and who he is? And I've personally just found it so helpful. And we're going to carry that on for the next few weeks as we lead up towards Focus. And today we are looking at this statement that he makes in John chapter 8, verse 12, that's going to come up on the screens. And it says this, it says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We've just been singing, in that beautiful song. It was so powerful to sing. And at the end, it's that the bridge says, "There's no shadow you won't light up." And we're announcing that to God. It's just there's no darkness that's bigger than you. And what Jesus is doing in this moment, as he does so often with these statements, he's stepping in to not just saying something nice in the moment. He's stepping in to just really acknowledging something huge, theologically and culturally, for the Israelites and the Jewish people that he's talking to. He's making some really bold claims. For the Jewish nation, for the Israelites, their origin story was the very first words that the God of the universe announced over the uncreated universe in order to start creating it, was let there be light. So when him saying, I am the light, he's stepping into this, he's saying not just little things, he's saying big things. They would all have known those passages in Isaiah that we love churning out at Christmas time, and if you're anything like me, largely forget the rest of the time. The prophecies that said the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned, and that goes on to be, for unto us a child is born, a son is given, and there's those things that point towards Jesus. And so in this moment, he's acknowledging that all these things are about him. That this light that was spoken by the God of the universe to start the creation of the world is the very same thing that he in person is. Which is all great and lovely and nice and seems to fit really nicely, apart from life's just really hard at times. The world is really dark. Everything is really tough. I wrote down a few things and then I got overwhelmed, so I stopped. But this is, quickly, I wrote down mental health crisis, economy and meltdown, war everywhere, knife crime, people so desperate and so out of other options that they are traveling with their families across oceans in tiny dinghies. And that was just 45 seconds of me. And then I was just I have to stop because it's just so dark. And the darkness seems so overwhelming when we actually stop and stare at it, whether that's just the stuff going on in our own lives or the stuff going on in our neighborhoods or our country or our city or the world. The longer we stare at it, the more it just seems to be unmovable, unshakable, and overwhelming. So what does it mean for us to be a church that starts, or to be a people who starts to just acknowledge and accept some of these things that Jesus is saying about light? What does it look like for us to believe or begin to believe that this darkness that seems so overwhelming, so all-encompassing, that there is hope, that there is something, that there is Jesus, that there is light in the middle of it? And so I'd love to talk this morning on 3 ways that I think this passage helps us to begin that that challenging process that I think if you're anything like me, will just be the battle and, moment of our lives, the story of our lives. We'll never completely get perfect in this until we're in glory. But what does it look like for us to begin that journey of starting to believe that there's more than the darkness? And there's three things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about knowing the person, knowing the purpose, and knowing the power. Knowing the person, knowing the purpose, and knowing the power of the light. So number one, know the person. I have an uncle. His name is Simon. I call him Uncle Simon, unsurprisingly. He went on honeymoon a number of years ago, and he loves golf. He just absolutely adores golf. He now set up a company that does golf stuff, so he gets to do his favorite thing for a job. And his wife doesn't share this passion, and so they sort of came to some negotiation on their honeymoon in Fiji that he'd be allowed one round of golf. And so actually, I think by the time the round of golf came around, it was nice to have a bit of, sort of time. And so he goes off and he does that thing which apparently you do if you're not awful at golf like I am, which is you're up for playing with a stranger, and it's not the most embarrassing thing in the world if you're by yourself. And so you go to the golf park and you get there by yourself. And if somebody else is there and they're also by themselves, you're like, do you want to play together? And that's like a normal thing. If that was me, I'd be like, no one else can see me hit any shots. And so he meets this guy who seems really nice, and the guy goes, oh, should we just play together? And he's just like, oh, yeah, that'd be nice. And they hit it off. If it wasn't on the other side of the world, he'd be like, we are going to be best friends forever. This guy is amazing. He's called Dave. He was so chatty. He was really engaging. He was really complimentary about the golf shots. They were about the same level, and so it wasn't awkward for either of them, and they were just loving it. And I think probably in the honeymoon haze, it's actually quite embarrassing for him to look back on now or to tell this story, which is why I love telling it on his behalf. But at around hole 15, 16, 17, so getting towards the end of the round, he realizes that he's talked a lot about his job, but he's not asked Dave what he does. And he's like, oh, Dave, what do you do? And Dave's like, oh. And then clearly Dave thought about it for a bit and then was like, it's just easier to be honest, isn't it? I'm the president of Fiji. and he's just like, that's why there's two guys in suits who've been following us for one hole behind for the whole thing. He's like, yeah. He's just like, I didn't notice on my honeymoon. He's just like, what do I call you? Your honor, your most Fijianness, you're like, and he's like, Dave, you call me Dave. And there was this moment where it could potentially all have shifted. And Dave didn't allow it to be. He's just like, I'm the president, you call me Dave, because that's who we are to each other. And there's this beautiful reality in what Jesus is doing, in that he's announcing himself to be the light of the world. He's announcing himself to be the very thing that the God of the universe, spoke over nothingness to start bringing somethingness into something. But in the same way, he's saying that the only way you can find that is by having an intimate, personal relationship with me. I'm not the president, I'm Dave. I am also the president, but I want you to know me as this intimate friend. I want you to know me as this person that you can have a real life relationship with. And so the light of the world is this most cosmic, mystical, wonderful, powerful thing, but it's also a person whose name is Jesus, who wants to know you as an individual, who wants to encounter you and wants you to encounter him. So the first thing that we do on this journey towards starting to think about how we deal with dark times is to acknowledge that the light that can come into that darkness is not a series of rules and stipulations that you need to get right. It's not a religion that you need to be perfect at. It's not a load of rituals that you need to fulfill adequately or perfectly. It's not a load of steps that you need to do. It's a person who you have a relationship with. The light of the world is a person, and his name is Jesus. So number one, know the person. Number two, know the purpose of the light. So Jesus, a bit later in his ministry, in another book about his life called Matthew, or written by a guy called Matthew, and he he kind of expands on this in a beautiful and equally confusing way. So he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And then, later, he goes, helpfully, to a load of his followers and a load of other people, you are the light of the world. It's really confusing. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. I don't know why you'd ever do that, but perhaps they did. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others. So he's acknowledged that he is the light of the world. But then in this glorious, wonderful reality of the way that God wants to break into the world, he's not up with it just being him. He's also up for us, filled with him, being that very same light. He doesn't differentiate. He doesn't go, I am the light of the world, and then later goes, you are also a little bit of an accessory help in being the light of the world. He's like, I am the light of the world. You, full of me, are also the same light of the world. The reality is, if God has made a difference in here, then this should be something that the world sees that is different externally, that radiates out. Let me give you an example. I have, as some of you will know, by my trainers today and by my poor fashion choices many other of the days, that I quite like bright colours. And my long-suffering wife has largely made her peace with the fact that I dress like an idiot at times. But one of the many moments that it's had more of a concerning impact for her is when we come to like redecorating seasons in the various houses that we've lived in the last few years. And normally we just, we just land with white. Let's just paint things white, and then neither of us will argue, and it will be fine. And when we were in our previous church in London, they invited us to move from one house to another, and they even offered to like paint bits of this house various colours, which was like a red rag to a bull for me, because I was just like, this is the thing. And so we came up with very modest suggestions for most of the rooms. And then I was just like, can we have just one thing that's like just like bright yellow? She's like, no. And she went to talk to some of her friends. So like mums from school and stuff, and there was one who's doing like an interior design degree, and she was like, you must never let this happen. And she even provided a book for evidence. So there was this book, I didn't even know books like this existed, but it talked like for each room, the different colours that you can paint into that room. And there was a bedroom section, and it said bedroom yellow. And it said, if you paint your bedroom or any part of your bedroom yellow, one of two things will happen. You will wake up full of life and joy every single morning, or you will wake up and immediately be sick every single morning. So I, of course, ignored the second one and was like, this is great. So we had a sort of debate, and I think there were some trade-offs, but I can't remember what the other ones were. I think it was some Pharaoh and Paul thing in the kitchen. And we ended up painting this wall-to-wall block of cupboards bright yellow. And I've got a photo just so that you can emote with Joe Roper, hopefully. That's one of the worst reactions to anything I've ever said. Do you want to know the most horrific thing about this? Joe tore me down from a more intense yellow. That was actually yellow number 2 on the extreme yellow, sort of thing that they had. And so we painted our cupboards this. And to be fair, I lived a life where I woke up every morning and I was filled with joy and life, and no one that we know was sick as a result of being in that room. And interestingly, we were living in this sort of flat which tagged on to the end of this very ugly church hall building. If you've ever been to HTB, the church in South Kensington, it's just the beautiful church, ugly church hall. And we lived right on the end of this. And it was sort of covered in ivy, and so you couldn't really see any of what was going on in the inside, apart from one bedroom window seemed to have no ivy over it. It's probably burned from just being near that. And this one had a perfect line of sight to this sort of area where everybody would gather. And without realizing it, the only bit of our house that was visible from the outside were these cupboards. So the only thing that anyone knew about any of our interior design choices were these cupboards. And so we have people coming all the time. It's like, is your entire house completely ridiculous? It's like, no, it's just those. But it's the same thing. It's like a decision we made on the inside gave this profound message to the outside. A decision that we'd made on the inside, and it's two decisions: one, to paint them a ridiculous color, and two, to open up our blinds and resist the shame. Meant that people knew something profound about us from the outside as they looked in. These horrific cupboards were allowed to radiate to the world. And this is what Jesus is saying when he says both I am the light, but also you are the light. It's that when you are filled up full of me, when you make a decision to follow me, when you say yes to me, when you acknowledge that I am the light of the world, then you too will become that same light. Something will change within you. That means that other people will look at you differently, will see you differently in the way you talk, act, behave. So what does this mean for us individually, but probably also, more importantly, what does this mean for us as a church? What are we supposed to look like? What is church supposed to look like? Well, I think I've lost everybody's respect today, so I think it's fair to go for this next thing, which is I think the church should look like a pyramid-shaped hotel in Las Vegas. And I got a picture for you of the pyramid-shaped hotel in Las Vegas. And this is the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. It's been there for many decades. And it holds the title for the world's strongest light beam, by quite a long way, I believe, shining with an astounding intensity of 42.3 billion candela, which I believe is a lot, times 100. Utilizing a series of curved mirrors, the Luxor lamp focuses light from 39 xenon lamps into an incredibly narrow beam. This concentrated light is so powerful that one could read a newspaper from 10 miles away. On a clear night, the beam is visible from up to 275 miles away and to aircraft cruising at cruising altitude, so 37,000 feet, including those over Los Angeles from Nevada. This is what the church is supposed to look like. It's a group of people so filled with Jesus that anyone and everybody, and there's something about our individualness as well, that we're meant to be out in the world, but there's also this beautiful thing of when we come together, filled together, when we worship together, when we pray together, when we go out together, that what people look at is something that looks like this. They see light. They see the light of the world breaking into the darkness around it. And that light becomes attractive, whether it's people wanting to read their newspapers from 10 miles away, or whether, as I have found out doing a deep dive into research, it is the billions of insects that are attracted to this, to the point where it now has its own ecosystem of bats that eat the insects, and then things that eat the bats, and then things that eat the things that eat the bats, that would never exist if there wasn't a big light. But stuff gets attracted to it. If Jesus is the light of the world and us filled with him are also meant to be the light of the world, then this is meant to be what we look like, filled with him. That's the purpose of the light. Not that we just acknowledge the person of the light and be like, that's great. It's that we both, as well as receiving, we radiate it out to the world. So, know the person, know the purpose, and then finally know the power. Know the power of the light. And this is where it gets really, really hard in life in general, but particularly as we wrestle with a difficult season like we're in at the moment as a church. Because the Bible's emphatic about the power of this light, the power of this light that Jesus says that he is, and the context of how powerful it is and how significantly and comprehensively any amount of darkness is overcome. We read at the start of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And then this is the mic drop. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And this is the biggest, I think the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges for us as Christians in this day and age, is to stand in this now and not yet, to stand in this gap between these two seemingly polar opposites of what we believe God has already done and the fact that it's still a mess now. It's so hard, so overwhelming, it's so difficult. Because the Bible tells us emphatically that Jesus has already done it. There's this reality with that culture has always been able to do, but I think culture is 10 times more able to do at the moment. It makes us believe that we're fighting a war that we've already won. Makes us believe that there's this battle between light and darkness, when on the cross, Jesus did it, all done, finished. It is finished, the end. And so it's biblically, like darkness is defeated, everything is great. Jesus has done it. And that's matched with the light and darkness analogy, because the minute there's any light, darkness doesn't exist. Darkness isn't actually a thing that exists. Darkness is simply defined by the absence of light. So the minute there is light, there is no more darkness, even if it's just the tiny amount of light. And so there's this profound truth in the Bible that, like, Jesus has won. God is victorious, but we don't feel like that, because there's this other profound truth that the world is full of darkness. The world is full of mess. The world is full of stress and anxiety and all those things that I listed at the start. And they're just the beginning. We could list 10 times more if we all sat down and did it together. So there's this other call. The first call is to believe that truth, that Jesus has done something on the cross that has shifted stuff forever in that one moment. But there's this other call, which is to stand in the tension, to stand in the mess, to stand in the uncertainty, to stand in the now and not yet, to stand in the darkness, and to believe that light is going to come in every situation, that light is going to come. One of my absolute favorite verses in the whole Bible, it says this: I have posted watchmen on your walls, Jerusalem. They will be never silent day or night. You who call on the Lord, give yourselves no rest, and give him no rest till he establishes Jerusalem and makes her the praise of the earth. You see, what a watchman would do is they would stand on the edge of the wall of the city at night. That would be their job. There'd be a night watchman, and they would be there, and their job would be to stare out into darkness. They would have no other job but literally to stare into the darkness. And they would know for certain that light is coming. But when it's your job to just stand up and just stare into darkness, it seems to go on forever and ever and ever. And it would be their job and their privilege to see that first little glimmer of dawn on the horizon, when that first speck of light just started to shine some light and some hope and some warmth on all this darkness that they'd seen before. And this is the analogy that God gives us to how we're supposed to deal with these times. And this is the imperative that he gives us in prayer, that he has placed us like watchmen on the walls of our cities and our nation and our neighborhoods and our workplaces to stare into the darkness and believe that just like the dawn is going to come, light is going to come. And it's really hard. It's really difficult to do that day after day after day. Really difficult to show up with the same enthusiasm that broken relationship or that broken situation or that really dark moment that we're in is ever going to get any better or ever going to be any different, let alone that I'm going to bring anything, however filled I am with Jesus, to that situation. I've had the privilege of meeting loads of people who have got this and lived this out so much better than I do. Got a mate from the church that we were at with the yellow doors called Gav. And you may have heard, we've talked about this a couple of times before. But Gav used to work in advertising, and he used to turn up after he became a Christian every week, just full of Jesus, believing that it would make some difference, him being in that place full of Jesus. And one day, somebody was sick in his office. And so he said, I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus sometimes can heal people. Can I pray for you to be healed straight away right now? And the person was like, yep. She's like, cool. They prayed. Nothing happened. Not even slightly, not even a little bit. Didn't even feel particularly warm or happy or loved. She's just like, okay. And they went back to their advertising. And 6 years later, I was sat on an Online Alpha course during the pandemic. And this lady called Chloe and her fiance logged on. And Chloe went, 6 years ago, I was sat 3 desks along when Gav offered to pray for that person. They prayed and absolutely nothing happened. And I've not been able to get that moment out of my head from then until now. And it's the pandemic, and I'm bored. So I've come on Alpha. She was healed of a long-term back problem on the Alpha Saturday. Her husband now was healed of some other, no, he had 2 things, and there was a really specific word that was given on Healing Week around an ear and a little finger at the same time. And so he's like, well, that's definitely me, and God healed one, but not the other, which is just, again, crazy and confusing. But and they both came to faith. And they're married, and they love Jesus because somebody prayed for someone in their office, and it made no difference in that moment. That is somebody who is able to stand on the walls and stare into the darkness and believe that there is going to be dawn one day. Believe that there's going to be light. They know the power of the light that is a person, the light that when that person comes to live with them radiates out of them, the light that makes a difference in darkness. So that's the faith that we're being called to have. The faith to believe that God is that big, that he has done it all. But the faith to also believe that in the darkness, in the mess, in the uncertainty, in the chaos, in the anxiety, in the darkness, that there is the hope of light, even if we can't see it yet. So I'd love us just to spend a bit of time just praying into that as a church, what that might look like. I'm about to have a coughing fit, so I'm going to invite Pippa and Warren to come and lead that time. I'm sure they'll do brilliantly. But should we just stand together?